in the partnership since its inception. We have a representative on the executive team of the partnership. They participate in our executive team meetings occasionally, and they have limited availability to attend every meeting, but we do reach out to them personally periodically. NOAA Fisheries was also a founding partner in developing the salmon superhighway strategy, and NOAA Fisheries is an active funding partner. We currently have a $1.2 million grant from NOAA through their community-based restoration program that is funding some of our work. Irma Lagomarsino has occasionally attended executive team meetings. We've invited NOAA to become a full partner in the salmon superhighway. There's been some concern about NOAA being a full executive team member due to their competitive grant programs, and they didn't want to create any sort of conflict of interest there. But we are engaged with NOAA. They support our work. I'll just quote a letter of support from NOAA for the salmon superhighway that was written for us in 2020. It says, salmon superhighway's scale of efforts to reconnect salmon with the habitat they depend upon by updating road crossings and other barriers across its 6-river landscape coincides with a substantial portion of the geographic range of the threatened Oregon coho salmon. The salmon superhighway is also benefiting other valuable anadromous species. Increasing the quantity and quality of coho juvenile rearing habitat is our best bet for counteracting reductions in marine survival from changing ocean conditions and recovering species. So we're definitely engaged with NOAA on a regular basis and look forward to continuing to work with them.
Thanks for all being here this afternoon and your great explanations of your projects. Next question is, many of the proposals identified fish passage barriers along the salmon superhighway are partial barriers. How does the partnership evaluate the ecological benefits versus cost to replace partial barriers?
Thanks for that question. Yes, we do. We look at partial and full barriers together. We're considering the need to address all life history stages and for the fish species that we are working with. For example, juvenile coho frequently migrate upstream for rearing habitat. Juvenile fish may need to access upstream or downstream habitat for cold water or high flow refugia. And lamprey especially can have significant challenges or be fully impeded by what is considered a partial barrier for salmon. As well, partial barriers can become full barriers over time due to scour at the outlet, creating perched culverts, or sediment deposition upstream of the culvert that can clog the crossing. Partial barriers impede flow, sediment transport, and movement of large wood through the system, which can impair habitat conditions. So, when we think of these barriers as partial or full barriers, often we're just thinking about adult fish and whether they can pass through the barrier, but we're really considering all life stages and different species of fish. I'm going to invite Jim Capurso to comment on this as well.
Thanks, Sarah. I thought you covered it really well. We haven't really orchestrated who answers what question. So I think we'll probably just jump in as seen fit, but Sarah covered it really well. I think the only other thing that I'd point out is that both the partial barriers and the full barriers, in my experience, have always been under capacity culverts. And so when you're looking at road stream crossings, they're all under capacity, which means that they're having environmental effects downstream and upstream of the road stream crossing. Affecting things like the water quality that occurs downstream, eroding stream banks and stream beds downstream of the outlet of the culvert. And these are things that get covered whether it's a full barrier or a partial barrier. Other than that, Sarah, I think you nailed it.
one other point that I might add is that whether it's a full barrier or a partial barrier, these undersized culverts can be at risk of catastrophic failure. And if you have a catastrophic failure of a barrier culvert, doesn't matter whether it's full or partial, you're going to have the same negative effects of a big influx of sediment into the system. So we're really, trying to address any barrier, whether it's full or partial.
Hey, Sarah, one thing I'd throw in too is that for real ecological reconnection, which is going to benefit things like amphibians, actually some mammals, crustacea, mollusks. It's one of the things that if you just look at a partial barrier, you get a really narrow view of what we're trying to do with reconnection and the benefits to the whole aquatic system.
Thanks, Steve.
Great, thanks everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for the detailed responses on your FIP application. The next question we have for your team is, how was the threshold to restore passage to 95% of historic habitat determined as the optimal threshold?
Thanks. When the founding members of the Salmon Superhighway were going through the process of determining what would be the optimal goal for habitat reconnection, one thing that they looked at was a common salmon steelhead recovery criteria, which is related to distribution, or the percent of historic habitat measured as stream miles. This is supported by Paul McElhaney's Viable Salmonid Population publication via Tech Memo in 2000. The paper describes that a viable salmon population, or VSP, is defined by a variety of parameters, including population growth rate, population spatial structure, and diversity. And as I mentioned in our introductory remarks, the Salmon Superhighway is focused on the spatial structure parameter, how the population or evolutionarily significant unit is distributed across the landscape. As a default, the historic spatial processes should be preserved to the maximum extent practicable, because we assume that the historical population structure was sustainable. We do not know whether a novel spatial structure will be. So what we do know is that the amount of available habitat has been significantly reduced by man-made impacts. So the target is to restore historic spatial structure. And by doing so, we can maximize habitat opportunities and environmental variation, allowing fish to take advantage of annual and seasonal variations in habitat to optimize reproduction and survival. ESUs are believed to have been historically self-sustaining, and the historical number and distributions of populations serves as a useful default goal. So obviously, reconnecting 100% of the historic habitat would be very difficult and very costly. So what the partnership did was use a cost optimization fish passage model called OptiPass. And this model allowed the partnership to prioritize all of the crossings that were identified across the landscape to understand which barriers are the top priority barriers that are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck conservation-wise, or get you as close to the historically available habitat as possible. So when the partners ran OptiPass, they could see that as you increase your budget, available to do these habitat reconnection projects, we had about 275 identified barriers. So as you increase your budget and you start to address more and more barriers, at a certain point, your return on investment in terms of miles reconnected starts to level off, and you get a diminishing return on your investment. And that happened right at about 95% of available habitat. So that was a kind of a sweet spot that got us really close to reconnecting, a vast majority of historically available habitat, but didn't get us into the significantly diminishing returns after that. So our original budget estimate portfolio had 93 crossings at a cost estimate of $34 million to reach 95% of habitat reconnected. And then the remaining 5% of habitat is populated with nearly 200 barriers. So, that's how we made our decisions about the 95% habitat reconnection. Oh, Jim's pulled up a graph to show what I was talking about.
Yeah, Sarah, that was really good. I'll jump in here just really quick here and share. This is part of a slideshow that I give when I talk about OptiPass. It used to be called APAS. And you can see as you go to the right, you get diminishing returns. What we really want to operate on is that left part of the graph. That's where you really get the big bang for your buck. And as you start going to the left, you really lose your ability to acquire a lot of that habitat back. And so we had to find that sweet spot, that cutoff. And we decided as a partnership to land at 95%. Because after that, you're not getting miles of habitat upstream of these road stream crossings, but it's measured in less than a tenth of a mile or less. But anyway, this graph that you're seeing here is something that's really neat that gets generated here from the OptiPass model. And so anytime you prioritize your fish passage projects at any scale, you get this graph that's pretty handy to make those calls. Thanks.
All right, well, thanks for that. The next question we have for you is the application describes ecological benefits to fish passage. What ecological benefits beyond restoring passage are gained by implementing these passage projects? We heard a little bit of that, but if you want to kind of elaborate any more.
Great, thank you. So as we mentioned, when you take out a vastly undersized culvert and replace it with a adequately sized culvert, or in many cases a bridge, you are restoring flow capacities at road stream crossings. You are eliminating the situation where you have sediment and debris and large wood backing up behind the culvert, which is starving the downstream downstream reaches of sediment and wood, which exacerbates erosion and downcutting of the stream. So you end up with not only your passage issue, but you end up with degraded habitat in and around the crossing. So removing the in-stream barriers restores the natural stream processes that drive habitat formation. In addition, our projects drastically reduce the risk of road failure. Many of our projects are at or near tributary junctions. These are critical areas for delivery of sediment to main stem rivers, fish refugia from high flows and high temperatures, and they are important for primary productivity in the food web. And we're also building on existing restoration and tidal areas by increasing access to spawning and rearing habitat and restoring natural sediment delivery throughout the system. The entire system works better to maximize benefits for all species and life stages. And so our projects are addressing passage, but they're improving habitat throughout the system. And we're also, enabling migration of other species, as Dave mentioned, of, amphibians, crustaceans, small mammals, sometimes even large mammals, have a situation where they can cross under the bridge through the stream corridor without going over the road. So there's quite a few ecological benefits associated with the project.
Sarah, a couple more that I'll throw in, if I could, please. One is we can make an assumption that each of these road stream crossings that we address through this partnership are under capacity. So in addition to the cutting downstream, you can expect bed aggradation upstream, the building of the stream bed from the pooling effect as the stream gets backed up as it's trying to pass through the road stream crossing. And with that pooling, bed load drops down and anything else the stream's covering or conveying drops down, and it affects the passage of that material. So that affects the ecology downstream, right? If you get a lot of these finer gravels, wood, other things depositing upstream of these road stream crossings. Also, from my perspective, I'd like to say that when I talk about ecology, I include the social aspects of ecology. And these road stream crossings are ones that have, as Sarah mentioned, high potential of blowing out and can easily jeopardize the safety of humans using these roads and can really affect the human dimensions of the ecosystem. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim.
All right, if you guys are ready, I'll keep going with the last one. So last formal question, when it is down to the last few prioritized projects, there isn't the ability to move further down the list to the next willing landowner. How would the partnership adjust the project priority list if some landowners do not agree to a project?
That's a great question. Fortunately, we've had very few situations or projects that are blocked by unwilling landowners. I think one aspect of the Salmon Superhighway and our projects is that they are such a win-win for not only fish and wildlife, but for people as well. It's pretty easy to sell the concept of improving fish passage by improving a crossing on or adjacent to somebody's property, because there are so many multiple benefits. And we've had great support in the community for our project. So fortunately, we haven't run into that situation in very many cases. If we, and if we do, we just put the project on hold and revisit it later on when, because landowners change, opinions change. If we were down to the last few and we had unwilling landowners, we do, beyond our top 93 priority list, we have our prioritization sort of continues down. So, we would have the ability to, move down the list and add on another project if that was, considered to be the best decision at the time. But we're looking at our group of projects as a portfolio of projects designed to achieve that 95% habitat connectivity. So, if we had to switch a project out at the end because of one or two unwilling landowners, we would have the ability to do that.
One comment that we really haven't touched on is that when this whole thing started, there had been some inventories statewide and regionally on fish passage barriers, and the numbers were on the order of 15 to 20,000. And one of the major challenges is salmon were listed, and the recognition that reconnection of streams is kind of the foundation for restoration was the question of how do you do this in a cost-efficient manner and as quickly as possible. And what Sarah was talking about is a really good example. We picked these 6 basins based on some modeling statewide, and it showed that these were some of the most productive basins or watersheds for salmon. And this is really a pilot project, and the creation of a portfolio of projects was the idea of get in, do what you need to do, focus the investment, and then be able to move on to another area. And so this is really a piloting a concept that really is quite different from the way it's done in most places, where you do one at a time. And really, you don't know when you're ever finished. And the advantage with this is we can tell you when we're done. And that's almost never done with restoration. It just goes on forever. I would say this project, when we get to the end, we can say time to move on. And other restoration actions can take place after we've reconnected the system. Thanks.
All right, we've got about 4 minutes remaining if the committee has any additional questions.
I'll ask one kind of quick one, more along the lines of sort of the bigger picture here. I mean, you know, that the habitat and the focus on, I think you said, Sarah, that specifically focused on the spatial structure out of those other elements that are important to the species. So how does this stitch into some of those other things? There's a lot of, you know, diverse land ownership with different land use objectives that can impact the fishery. So how does sort of the focus on habitat kind of stitch in with all the other challenges that this species face?
That's a great question. Obviously, there are a lot of other challenges that the species are facing. And so, you know, we understand and recognize that we are, you know, working on one component within a, you know, whole universe of restoration actions and threats that need to be addressed. And so, you know, we recognize many of our partners that are here with us today that are engaging in other restoration actions to address the needs for habitat. But, you know, we understand that we're working on a narrow focus of addressing that one component of a viable population, but that there are a vast array of other actions that need to be completed.
The only other thing I'd add is of the delisting criteria, or the viability criteria, distribution, connectivity is one of the few that we can really directly affect and relatively quickly. And it does have links to some of the other variables like population and diversity. Once they have a whole system to move into, it can affect the other variables. And it really is a foundation for future work. So with the broad partnership, it's not being done in isolation. It's really done in conjunction with other work that's going on, with the idea that it will help benefit all those elements, but with a focus on distribution.
Okay, with that, we are at time. I want to thank the Salmon Superhighway Partnership for your time today, your time building the application, and for the dialogue that we've had with the committee. So thanks very much. And we are going to take a few minutes to transition to the next partnership.
Thank you very much.
All right, it looks like we've got everyone from the partnership here. The next group up is the 10 Mile Lake Steering Committee. Welcome to the partnership. We'll have you give a brief overview to your application, and then the rest of the time will be for the grants committee to ask questions. We're at 1:18, so we'll have 30 minutes. That'll take us to 1:48. And I'll turn it over to the partnership for your intro.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Mader. I work for the 10 Mile Lake Space Partnership and with the 10 Mile Lake Steering Committee. Since we got moved up a little bit, I have John Schaefer from the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw joining us. Our DEQ reps are unable, but it's just us two, so hopefully we'll make it quick and painless for everyone. Oh, I see Ashley. Hi, Ashley. I'm sorry. Thank you guys for coming. Just my quick intro. Our FIP project, these are 3 wetland restoration projects, 2 with land acquisition. This is the built up and accumulation of over 25 years of work. We've completed most of our upland sediment abatements, and we've finally reached a point where we are comfortable in proposing to remove the land uses that we've been so supportive of working with best management practices. These have been prioritized through the long science of the nutrient budget. These projects are ready to go, shovel ready. The permits in operation, the engineering is completed. We just received a grant from the 319 program, and we're just going forward. It's removing the land use and restoring these areas to wetlands has been a very, it's a long process for us, but we're there. And these projects and the landowners are willing to do it. So I'm pleased that we're here at this point. I think all of us should be here, even though, you know, our ranking wasn't the best, but I think it shows the advancement of a long time watershed council. So with that said, I am prepared to answer any questions. I mean, from all the way to 1997 and now. So I did submit a quick draft of some answers for the staff. So I hope those were available, but I am ready to answer when everybody or talk when everybody's ready.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Just, were you saying that some of the project partners weren't able to make the call because of the earlier time slot, or?
There's a couple of them, and then several others, ODF and W, that the dates were booked. They were there. These 10 members are the same team members on many of your other partnerships, like the tribes. And so they were unable to make it. But I think I'm probably going to get in trouble with Kendra Giard and Brian Dugan because I was unable to reach them. But we're prepared to go forward, and we'll fill them in tonight's meeting.
Okay. Well, sorry about the timing.
Oh, it's not. No, we're pleased to be able to have our time.
Okay. All right. Just double checking on that. So the first question we had for you, which I haven't seen the written stuff, so sorry if you have to repeat yourself, but could you describe the partnership's decision-making process and how the projects listed in the work plan were prioritized?
Yes, and I'm kind of reviewing my own notes. These projects really were prioritized back when we first started in 99 to 2000, with our nutrient budget study. And it clearly stated that if we restore wetlands 1,000 yards above the lake, we will get 75% improvement to water quality and salmonid habitat. From there, the partners, we've been together for a long time. Schaefer and I went to junior high together. We have known these priorities. We've known that sometimes they weren't politically acceptable at sometimes, and we moved with others, but these have been prioritized for a long time. These are the answers. Now I want to say the final answers, but the last improvements that I think we can make. I hope that, did that make sense? Look at my notes. Our prioritization for particular projects, we have 3. The Benson Creek, let's call it number 1. It is prioritized because it's ready to go with Lone Rock Resources and there's no land acquisition. Our Big Creek and our Johnson Creek include land acquisition, and those are number 2 and number 3 respectively on our list to go. So that's another way we prioritize those particular projects. We prioritize most of our, due to land use, most of our fencing upstream, and we're down. We actually work down. And these are our final priorities besides some of the lake issues. Yeah, I hope it was that satisfactory or any more.
Thank you. That's great. Appreciate it. Thanks for everyone for being on the call and telling us about your project. Your next question is, the proposed geography includes a significant amount of agricultural land. Describe why an agricultural representative will not be needed to achieve the proposed ecological outcomes of the initiative.
I understand that question. First, agricultural land and ODA are my partner. In fact, I did not mention that ODA and the Coos Soil and Water have listed 10 Mile for 2 years to be a riparian priority to talk to landowners. We also, another reason is we consider ourselves the #1 contact for agricultural landowners. All of my landowners, I have their personal phone numbers. They are my family. I've been on their lands for 25 years. And we are the ones that lead people onto the land. So we spent 25 years learning agriculture in 10 Mile with no respect to ODA or anybody else. And we worked through that and developed projects that were achieve their objectives and ours.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon. Thanks very much for your time and your details on your FIP application. The next question we have for you and your team is to please describe how the proposed water quality goals also address the concerns around salmon recovery in the initiative geography.
Freedom to speak. Boy, that question was kind of interesting. We kind of chuckled. We always thought water quality was important to salmon. So that question kind of got us a little bit. I only went to Marine Corps and OSU. We feel that when we achieve our water quality goals, that we'll achieve what the salmon need in return. And also, the water quality in 10 Mile Lakes, the #1 rearing area for coho salmon on the coast, is impacted. And these projects will do dramatic improvements to the water quality, thus the rearing, summer rearing and winter rearing habitats for coho. Is that satisfactory? Or that does say something in our geographic area, so that would be 10 Mile Lakes. And I think we're well known for water quality issues, and that's where our focus is, which impact coho too.
Gotcha. Thank you. So question number 4 is describe the wetland upstream restoration actions to be implemented, including their anticipated downstream benefits.
I'm going to take that question as what is our design for our wetlands? The current conditions on the majority of the properties are very similar. The mainstream, Benson, Big, Johnson, has been channelized to the south of the valleys. These are all east-west aspect flowing streams. And the northern streams coming have been ditched into what is called either a ditch or unnamed streams on the north side of the channels. We are taking these and we are making a new channel 30-foot wide, meandering through the center of these. And from the top of the property lines, we are bringing the ditch and the main system into this center, this new center channel that is meandered. The spoils partially will be removed, and some of them will be making wildlife islands on the downstream side. Our smallest project is 16 acres. The 2 larger projects are over 100 acres. We will be doing these planting plans basically with native willows and lower shrubs that are there. We expect our downstream benefits and our science, although some questions about the SWAP model, I'm not going to argue about modeling. We used the best model in 2002 that we paid for. That our modeling shows that if we can build a wetland 1,000 yards above the lake junction, we will have 75% improvements to water quality. In addition, these new channels provide definite rearing habitat for our coho, salmon, lamprey. Our 6-year lamprey study showed that larger lamprey use these lower channels before they migrate out to the ocean. We see multiple benefits that will reduce toxic algae, reduce our noxious weeds, improve water quality, not only for the 440 lake homeowners, but also the Coos Bay and North Bend Water, who has a water right to our lake. So these will make long-term benefits and improve the resiliency of not only Lakeside and the Lakeside, but also Coos Bay and North Bend. Excuse me. My phone's ringing. I hope I anticipated these wetlands. Some of the wetland benefits are very well known, but in particular ours, we have the science to show that it will improve our water quality by 75% at least.
Thank you. So your last formal question is, the budget is weighted heavily on land acquisition. Given the complexities and uncertainties around land acquisition, describe why the partnership feels confident that it will achieve the ecological outcomes described in the proposal.
Okay, I've only bought one house in my life. You're right, it is complex. We do have a active technical assistance to assist us with doing due diligence on our Big Creek property number 2. So we're purchasing Big Creek. There's 222 acres there, and Johns Creek, 177 acres there we're proposing to. Once we get through these processes of due diligence that we are working through, the biggest obstacle is finding out that a property survey costs $10,000 a mile, which is a lot of money. But I think that we will have no problem once we purchase these properties to get and restore to wetlands, and these properties will eventually be handled and managed by the Confederated Tribes. That's our eventual goal, is to hand this off to the original owners, and that who have the longevity to manage this. The watersheds, we may not be here, the tribes will be. And so that's the long-term goals for that. I think if we purchase it, we're going to achieve, I'm confused because when I say it's going to be done, I don't see any obstacles, either permits. The only obstacles I see is funding.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Courtney.
All right, we do have remaining time if the committee has additional questions.
Yeah, hey, Mike, on the, you mentioned a couple times about the modeling showing the 75% improvement in water quality.
Yes, sir.
Is that like, can you just, if you know offhand, can you talk a little bit about what parameters we're talking about? I'm assuming like sediment, temperature, what, are there any kind of?
Total suspended solids, nitrogen and phosphorus.
Okay.
Those are our big ones. Those are the impactors. Our temperatures aren't that bad there.
Gotcha. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I have a quick follow-up. So you have some discrete plans, and just to confirm, all partners and all folks are on board, ready, willing, projects ready to go?
Absolutely. My partners are very busy, but yes, we are ready and excited to go. I mean, these projects, we're meeting at Benson Creek tonight for our annual tour with the landowners. So we are raring to go. We also have an opportunity we got accepted to apply for the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. Our budget is very similar. So it's kind of a little shot at the capacity to get money. We are actively working to get money. We don't expect to get this funding at all. But we are actively working. Either our plan B will go through individual land acquisition and restoration grants through OWEB, or we have two bigger opportunities through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and maybe with Jillian's help, the coastal wetlands. If I may say, I've been 25, this is Mater's retirement plan. In 6 years, we can look at everybody, and this is a compliment to the OWEB and GWEB. We've really done an incredible job. And when watershed councils, I heard another group say that we're almost there and we've done our job. We can all look good at that. I mean, we can feel good about that because it really is. From when gates were locked, and that's when we started, gates were locked, we couldn't get anywhere, to where now we're changing land use and purchasing land. It's been some incredible progress for the state of Oregon. And no matter, I support OWEB and watershed councils to my heart. We're the best. And the tribes. Sorry, guys. So there's my ending piece.
Well, we thank you for your dedication and all your work out there, Mike.
Dan, I don't know. I think I'm dumb. I think I must be writing grants for 26 years. I don't know. You got to wonder how smart I am. But
Tenacious. Sometimes it feels like it's playing a lottery ticket, you know?
I have a picture of Courtney when she was out measuring fences. That's how long I've been. So I do thank you in Marine Corps language, Semper Fi to all you guys, John, Ashley. I got to send you that other grant before I get in trouble. We got another opportunity too.
All right. Well, thank you all. Really appreciate your time today and the time you put into the application and the dialogue that we've just had with the committee. Tune in tomorrow for deliberations.
Okay, well, thank you all and be safe and good luck with the rest of your interviews. You're doing good work.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome. See you, Mark.
All right. We are going to take a break.
Can I jump in?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I have been communicating with our next cohort of applicants. And so I think I would ask the OWEB board members, if you could be back on at 2 o'clock. We might not start until 2:15. Just kind of waiting to see if partners are going to be all gathered or not. But if you could be back on and check in at 2:30, we'll then kind of figure out, or at 2 o'clock, excuse me. And then we will go from there.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Courtney.
We're still holding on, folks. Oops.
There you go.
We're still holding on for the next partnership. So just give us a few minutes.
Actually, I would just say check back out until 2:15 because they are not here and they were gonna try to make it sooner, but since I do not see them, I would assume that we will not get started again until 2:15. So go forth and do your emails and get your work done.
We'll put that one shot.
Thanks.
You can bring Eric.
See if we can entice anyone. All right, folks, welcome back. We're going to be diving into our next partnership application. Before we do, though, I just had a couple of notes I wanted to mention. In the last panel, there was reference to responses to the written questions that the Grants Committee is asking. We have not accepted those materials. We've not provided them to staff or to the board members. So I just wanted to make that clear for those following along. And the other item of note is that the committee members have received an email with the straw poll Survey Monkey link. You can feel free to go in there at any time or just wait till the end of the day today. We're not going to go over the results of the straw poll until tomorrow morning. And those will be delivered to the committee members just prior to the start, to the 8:30 start tomorrow morning. All right, next up, we welcome the Klamath Lake Forest Health Partnership. And as we've been doing today, we'll give the partnership some time to give a brief overview of your application, and then we'll turn it over to the committee for their questions. We allot 30 minutes to each interview. It's 2:21, so we'll go through 2:51. And take it away, Klamath Lake Forest Health Partnership.
Thank you very much. My name is Autumn Muir, and I'm the Uplands Coordinator for the Lake County Umbrella Watershed Council. Here today, we have most of our core partners here in the room with us, representing Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, Oregon Department of Forestry, Lake County Commissioners, U.S. Forest Service, Fremont Wainema National Forest. We have our Lake County Cooperative Weed Management Area, Lakeview NRCS. I have to look around the room. We've got our Lake County Resource Initiatives and several of our landowners, including non-industrial and industrial. We also should have one landowner joining us via Zoom, although I don't see him up there. So the Klamath Lake,
just so I know who we're looking for, what's the name of the landowner?
You Heidi.
Say that again, please.
You Heidi.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
The Klamath Lake Forest Health Partnership is the leader in Oregon in successfully implementing dry forest restoration at landscape scales and through shared stewardship. Our group published a paper in 2018 that other partnerships across the Pacific Northwest are now using. This publication describes in detail the many steps required to reduce risk and promote healthy, resilient forests across public and private lands and at large scales. This is not an easy task, and many across Oregon are still struggling with how to engage with so many landowners and accomplish this challenging goal. Our partnership has been successfully doing this since 2016, and we are now implementing in our third landscape. To date, in Klamath and Lake counties, our partnership has engaged with approximately 3,000 private landowners, collected forest health data on 100,000 acres of private land, and treated approximately 30,000 acres of private land and 45,000 acres of public land. Actual acres restored far exceeds any other project in the state of Oregon. With success in leveraging funds, we have also been able to increase capacity to provide the much needed technical assistance to landowners. The folks in this room here today have been effectively working together for several years, have extensive knowledge and experience, and are very passionate about reducing the risk of wildfire to our forest resources. We have already invested a tremendous amount of time engaging with private landowners within the Lake County All Lands Restoration Initiative. 95% of landowners have already given permission to access their properties to complete a mapping and inventory of their forests, with the understanding that we would work hard to pursue funding to implement treatments. With many of these landowners, we have already met one-on-one to discuss their land management objectives and to recommend treatments, and every landowner was provided a detailed map packet for their property. Landowners within this landscape have already been engaged, educated, and are eagerly waiting for financial and technical assistance to proceed with the restoration phase. With the recent wildfires in our area, they are very motivated to take action, but time is of the essence. The Lake County All Lands Restoration Initiative is very diverse, with a mosaic of dry ponderosa pine and mixed conifer. intermixed with aspen and juniper shrub steppe habitats. It is a patchwork of different dry forest types. Experience and science prove that to meet objectives, restoration needs to occur across all dry forest types within the same landscape, public and private. Our partnership has proven success in achieving this goal, and many others across the state look to the KLFHP to understand our success so they can mimic our efforts in other places.
Good afternoon, I'm Barry Schulenberger. I'm a Lake County Commissioner. Since 2018, over 650,000 acres have burned in wildfires in Klamath and Lake counties, and most of the burned area is high severity. For perspective, these fires extend 75 miles from east to west, burning old growth ponderosa, fish habitat, aspen, and meadows, all of which are a priority to this partnership, the public, the Klamath and Paiute tribes. These fires are burning ridgetop to ridgetop and more. The extensive loss of forest and watershed resources and the impact to our local economy and public from these recent wildfires is astounding. As noted in our strategic action plan, there are many Oregon conservation strategy species that rely on healthy, functioning dry forests to persist. The cost of suppressing these fires, along with the very high cost of post-fire recovery and reforestation, could have been prevented with restoration treatments through thinning and prescribed fire. The cost of restoring a green, healthy, functioning forest is minimal compared to the cost of suppression and post-fire recovery. It is a good investment, and it is imperative that we restore our remaining forests before losing them to another wildfire. Once we lose the forest to a wildfire, there are lasting impacts. For example, it takes centuries for an old growth ponderosa pine forest to establish post-fire. With active management through thinning and low intensity fire, forest and watershed resources will be healthy, diverse, and more resilient for the next wildfire.
Hello there, I'm Casey Johnson. I work as a stewardship forester with the Oregon Department of Forestry here in Lakeview. The landowners of Lake County have been heavily impacted by these wildfires, and they are motivated to work with our partnership. Not in the room with us today, but as partners, both John Shine and Chuck Kelly have been carrying out extensive upland treatments on their respective ranches for several years. Both ranches experienced lessened effects from the Patton Meadow and Cougar Peak fires in 2021 due to the active management completed with the support from our partnership. Here in the room with us today and via Zoom is Roger and Louise Linton, Dan Alonzo, and Hugh Heidi, all of which are landowners who through the years have worked with the Klamath Lake Forest Health Partnership. And both of these, or all three of these landowners, are ready to reintroduce low intensity fire. The partnership has helped the Lintons understand liability and many of the other ways of reducing risk when applying prescribed fire, such as implementing pre-treatments through thinning and pile burning, using experienced prescribed burners, having a science-based burn plan, and communicating with their neighbors. In 2021, the Forest Service implemented a successful cross-boundary prescribed fire on the Linton Ranch and the adjacent Forest Service land. We are lucky to have some of the most experienced prescribed burners right here in Lake County with our Fremont-Wendima National Forest, Lakeview BLM, Klamath Lake District ODF fire specialists, all of which work together to implement the largest prescribed burn program in Oregon. To be clear, our partnership does not have a fix for the liability issue. That is beyond our control, but we can help landowners understand ways to reduce risk when applying for prescribed fire, and we can help them weigh the trade-offs between the risks of prescribed fire burning versus the risks of a wildfire. Ultimately, this is up to each landowner. But when a landowner does choose to use prescribed fire as a management tool, our partnership is here to provide the technical support throughout the entire process. Slowly, our partnership is working to change the culture around the use of fire as an ecologically appropriate and necessary maintenance tool.
Through our ongoing work, we have seen firsthand how landowners spread the word to their neighbors, resulting in more landowners who are interested in taking action. When private land treatments start connecting to adjoining properties, such as our landowners here in the room, the Lintons, Collins Pine, Hugh Heidi, they're all immediately connected to each other and with neighboring federal land treatments. This is how we achieve holistic ridgetop to ridgetop restoration. We feel this is really the only way to set up a landscape that is resilient in the long term. In summary, the Lake County All Lands Restoration Initiative has all the elements for success: a highly functioning partnership with extensive experience, private landowners who are already engaged and ready to implement, trained foresters who are dedicated to providing the technical assistance and support to private landowners, NEPA-ready projects on the Fremont Wainema National Forest lands that are being implemented concurrently and which are providing over 132% of match in biennium 1 alone, as well as highly experienced prescribed burners. That concludes our introduction, and we'll be happy to take your questions.
Great. Well, thanks for that overview, and thank you all for making time in your day to meet with us. The first question up is if you could describe how the partnership will address private landowner engagement challenges within the initiative geography, and how the partners will earn community support beyond the landowners that have already agreed to participate in the initiative.
Definitely, I'd be happy to answer that. And again, I'm Casey Johnson. I work as a stewardship forester with the Department of Forestry here in Lakeview. The Lake County All Lands Restoration Initiative partnership will address the pending landowner engagement through action on the ground and through continuing our outreach strategy as outlined in our strategic action plan, our FIP application, as well as the 2018 publication authored by Lavelle et al., implementing cross-boundary landscape scale restoration and wildfire risk reduction projects. As our partnership has implemented landscape scale projects over the years, we are still surprised by the support garnered through action on the ground. These on-the-ground actions result in direct landowner and community support and engagement. While we have been successful in engaging a vast majority of the Lake County All Lands Restoration Initiative landowners through our multiple OWEB stakeholder engagement and technical assistance grants, project update mailings associated with those, as well as workshops, there remains a small fraction of the Lake County All Lands Restoration Initiative ownership base that we look forward to partnering with in the future. With the financial support offered within the stakeholder engagement component of our FIP proposal, we plan to continue our outreach efforts in association with the FIP initiative through radio announcements, newspaper posts, mailings, social media, social functions, workshops, neighboring ownership connections and treatments, as well as phone calls. These diverse outreach methods will better address the dynamic landowner base and how to best engage them. Similarly, our partnership has experienced firsthand the momentous impacts that seeing treatment accomplished does for attaining additional support from landowners and the community to participate and support the respective project. As it relates to the community support within the Lake County All Lands Restoration Initiative geography, we will once again let our actions speak louder than our words. While we have been successful in our direct outreach to landowners within the project areas with the support of our county commissioners and partners, we will look to open our project-related workshops to the greater public of Lakeview and Lake County. By extending the invitation to attend workshops to the greater community base of Lakeview and Lake County, we will begin to share and educate the public about the ecological needs of the forest and associated ecosystems, which in turn will start to change the societal outlook and engagement with forest management within our area.
Thank you for that. And thank you all for being here today and sharing your project with us. So your second question, can you describe how the partnership engages the Klamath tribes and how the tribes work with prescribed fire is incorporated into the initiative's strategic action plan?
Sure. And again, my name's Autumn Muir, and I'm the Uplinks Coordinator with the Lake County Umbrella Watershed Council. The Lake County All Lands Restoration Initiative Subcommittee did reach out to both the Klamath tribes and the Paiute tribes to inform them and discuss this FIP proposal. We had multiple email and phone conversations with key representatives from each tribe. They were given the opportunity to review and provide comment on the strategic action plan and to be a partner in this effort. Although they did not express interest in becoming key partners, they did provide comments to the project related mostly to ethnobotanical plants, and those have been incorporated into our project designs. In addition, the Lake County All Lands Restoration Initiative will follow requirements and recommendations from our local tribes for proper implementation of successful prescribed fire. Project newsletters will be provided to both tribes on an annual basis to provide continued communication avenues. Neither Klamath tribe nor the Paiute tribes elected to become core members of this initiative because it is outside of their area of key geographic focus. Additionally, our local tribes typically interact on a government-to-government level. So the fact that we are a small nonprofit working in a landscape that is not a priority to them may be part of the explanation for the lack of participation at this time. Additionally, we wanted to address here that the Nature Conservancy is an additional core partner of this proposal and a member of the Klamath Lake Forest Health Partnership. Craig Bentz, the director of the Nature Conservancy's Cycam Marsh Preserve, has been and will continue to provide leadership, local science, and an opportunity for learning exchange based upon experience and implementation of prescribed fire at the Cycam Marsh Preserve.
Thank you for that response and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for sharing your project with us and answering your questions in detail. The next question that the committee has for you is the proposal includes actions on roughly 10,000 acres of shrub steppe habitat. Could you please explain why this amount of shrub steppe habitat is appropriate for a dry type forest focused initiative? Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Amy Marcus. I'm the Cohesive Strategy Coordinator for the Fremont-Wainema National Forest. The Lake County All Lands Restoration Initiative is very diverse with a mosaic of ponderosa pine and mixed conifer intermixed with aspen, meadows, and juniper shrub steppe habitats. It's a patchwork of different dry forest types. This diversity is why it's such an important area for a variety of wildlife species, including several Oregon Conservation Strategy species. Experience from the folks here in the room today, along with a large body of science, proves that to meet our objectives, restoration needs to occur across all dry forest types within the same landscape, public and private. Recent wildfires are very fast moving and high severity. To effectively slow the spread of wildfire, treatments need to be contiguous across all dry forest types. We consulted with the OWEB FIP coordinators on this exact topic early in the process. We explained why it is important to treat all dry forest types for all the reasons I just mentioned. The OWEB staff were super supportive of this approach and really encouraged us to include shrub steppe in our proposal, but recommended that we not select it as a board identified priority because it's not the majority of the dry forest type within this landscape. The majority is actually ponderosa pine and mixed conifer. Our inclusion of the shrub steppe component of dry type forest habitat also illustrates our collaboration with the Oregon All Counties CCAA FIP proposal, and more importantly, ensures an appropriately thorough landscape scale approach that complements both of our different objectives to protect and enhance this landscape.
Great, thank you. Next question. There is a significant liability associated with reintroducing fire to the landscape. Could you describe how the partnership addresses the liability and also the smoke management concerns?
Good afternoon. My name is Jason Pettigrew, and I'm with the Oregon Department of Forestry representing this question as a prescribed fire burn boss. As Casey stated in the opening, our partnership doesn't have a solution for landowner liability, but we're very familiar to using this effective land management tool through education and implementation through our involvement in the largest prescribed fire burn program in Region 6 with the Forest Service, BLM, the Nature Conservancy, and ODF as partners with our landowners. We seek to bring fire back to manage our lands as we live in the effects of fire exclusion with catastrophic effects of too many years of biomass accumulation across the landscape. Much of the proposed thinning in the FIP is in preparation for fire. The outreach and education is in preparation for fire. And our focus on excellence and prescribed fire as a fire community reduces the risks of our landowners. We know how to be successful in Klamath and Lake counties in forest and fire management. That's through science-based, experience-based, and partnership-based land management where fire is an effective ecological management tool. Together, as a partnership, we know will reduce overall liability and the use of fire. And smoke management is integral to our operations as we work within a landscape of Class 1 air sheds, air quality zones, and smoke-sensitive receptor areas. ODF works by delegation of authority with a DEQ to manage smoke from forest land debris burning through reporting, education, and burn permits, and planning on agency and private lands, and working concurrently with our private landowners.
Thank you. So your final formal question is, how will the activities described in the proposal benefit Oregon conservation strategy species and or provide source drinking water protection? And if you don't know it, Klamath Lake Forest Health Group, you are frozen on the Zoom. You guys still there?
It's impressive that we got into 2:40 today without technical challenges.
I think they must still be there because they're kind of getting the echo.
I don't know how that done. There you go. Yeah, we'll just hold tight here to see if they can address their technical issue. Yay.
Okay.
Hi.
We're muted.
Okay, there?
We're muted.
Not anymore, right?
Okay.
I can
So
hear
sorry.
you and see you, Autumn.
Oh my gosh,
Everything is
so
great.
sorry.
No problem. I'm going to go ahead and say that question again. And no worries. All right, so final formal question. How will the activities described in the proposal benefit Oregon conservation strategy species and or provide source drinking water protection?
Good afternoon, and thank you for your consideration today. My name is John Muir. I'm the district wildlife biologist for Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife here in Lake County. The proposal will benefit Oregon conservation strategy species primarily through enhancing habitat complexity, increasing the diversity of age classes within dominant canopy species, and increasing the proportion of critically important early cereal plant communities, especially those associated with meadow complexes and moist soils. Active forest management that helps create these conditions increases biodiversity and species richness, which is a direct benefit to all conservation strategy species present in the system. Further, the proposal specifically and directly addresses in multiple places within the document the conservation actions recommended by ODFW in the Oregon Conservation Strategy for the conservation opportunity areas present within the project area. If funded, this FIP proposal will allow for the maintenance and enhancement of connections between upland and riparian habitats, in-channel flow, and hydrology, as well as enhancing ecological function through ensuring sufficient habitat complexity for wildlife, and by maintaining and restoring wet meadow and riparian habitats. Upland thinning and prescribed fire will directly address surface water issues through enhancement of riparian vegetation communities that provide shade to reduce water temperatures in summer and offer important habitat for insects and other fish foods, as well as by reducing the effects of sedimentation and poor water quality post-stand replacing wildfire. Additionally, by reducing overstory canopy density in a strategic manner, surface flows and groundwater tables will increase, providing more cold water refugia for fish species of conservation concern, specifically Warner sucker and a Great Basin red band trout.
Thank you.
So I'd like to just have a little closing statement. First of all, I want to apologize for the technical difficulty. Apparently our pro owl does not like to be touched during presentations, but it's because I was trying to move it around to capture all of these wonderful partners that took time out of their day to come and be with us here today, which I appreciate so much. In closing, our partnership has strived to fully address and surpass the FIP evaluation criteria recommended by the OWEB teams. We are confident that we have demonstrated all of the vital variables that contribute to that sweet spot which defines the likelihood of success. We will use this FIP funding as an opportunity to foster a sustainable, landowner-driven approach to forest management that will extend the life and benefits of the implemented treatments. With over 26% of our project area consumed by wildfires since we initiated this application for this grant, we know that funding could provide the opportunity to treat the remaining unburned portions before the next catastrophic megafire. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to share our vision.
Thanks very much to the partnership. Any last questions from grant committee members? Okay, hearing none, thank you very much to all the partners for being here today, for the time you put into the application and for the dialogue. Tune in tomorrow for deliberations by the grant committee. And we look forward to talking again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks,
And
guys.
we'll just take a few minutes to transition to the next group, so stand by.
And then you're all. I just have one question for the group is Ashley Russell part of your group?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, it looks like we've got everyone present. The next group up is the Coos Basin Coho Partnership. Welcome to the group. Thanks for being here today. As we've been doing, we'll have the partnership provide a brief overview of your application, and then we'll turn to the grants committee for questions. We've got 30 minutes. It's 2:47, so that'll carry us to 3:17. And go ahead, Coos Basin Partners.
Great, thank you. My name is Haley Lutz, and I'm the Executive Director for the Coos Watershed Association. And our organization is facilitating this group, the Coos Basin Coho Partnership. This group consists of 15 tribes, agencies, and organizations, and most of the partners have been working together for over 25 years, doing restoration, monitoring, and outreach work. The group was formally collated in 2018 when we started our Coho Strategic Action Planning process that culminated in December of 2021. This process, the Strategic Action Plan process, is a part of implementing the federal and state conservation and recovery plans for Coho on the Oregon coast. And the Strategic Action Plan is really what identifies the specific locations and strategies for the Coos Basin specifically, and how that contributes to the full coastal ESU recovery. The group is focused on coho for three large reasons. One being they're a keystone species, meaning that numerous other plants and animal species rely on coho for their survival. Second, they spend over a year in freshwater, which makes them an excellent year-round indicator of overall watershed health. And lastly, they occupy a range of habitats over a longer space and time, and the protection of restoration and coho benefits many other native species because of that. Our group approached SAP development with the core belief that healthy ecological, economic, and social conditions are needed to ensure a sustainable future for native coho through highly connected, functional, and productive landscapes. Through the implementation of the SAP, which is what our FIP is focused on, is implementing the strategic action plan, the first 6 years of that implementation. We hope to achieve 3 long-term outcomes for our strategic action plan over the 25-year time period, which is that the most productive sub-watersheds in the upper basin produce juvenile coho in great abundance and seed structurally complex main stem rivers that are capable of supporting year-round rearing and unimpeded fish movement between critical habitats. The amount of high-quality estuarine habitat available to coho doubles, proximate to 3 critical epicenters. These are located in the Catching Slough and downstream from the confluence of the Coos and Millicoma rivers and Palouse and Larson creeks. These epicenters are located at major confluences where multiple coho subpopulations merge together, and in tidal areas that allow individuals to self-select rearing locations along a salinity gradient within the highly productive estuarine environment. Our last goal for the SAP is that by 2045, the overwinter survival of juveniles doubles across the high-ranked sub-watersheds, leading to an increasing adult abundance trend that we can see at the population scale. To achieve these outcomes, the SAP emphasizes the restoration of critical coho habitats by repairing the watershed processes that generate and maintain them. This process-based approach relies heavily on the anchor habitat strategy, which seeks to identify, protect, and restore stream reaches that are most capable of supporting coho across the full spectrum of their freshwater residency. Our SAP identified 13 sub-watersheds as focal areas for our restoration and protection work. These watersheds were selected using a stronghold approach that included 2 different sets of ecological ranking criteria for the lower and upper basins. Through the implementation of the 6-year FIP, again, which is a small part of our 25-year vision that we're all collated for coho recovery, we intend to reach the following restoration goals within our 13 sub-watersheds. The FIP time period is less than a quarter of the overall time period for our SAP, but we're achieving over 25% of our goals in each of the identified ecological categories. Through the 6-year time period, we expect that 36% of the total SAP goal of in-stream complexity and off-channel rearing habitat will be restored in tributaries. That 25% of the in-stream complexity SAP goal is restored in the main stems. That all of the riparian function goals of the SAP will be achieved along the main stems and the tributaries. That 29% of the tidal connectivity goal in the SAP will be achieved through restoring disconnected fresh and salt marsh habitats, and that 32% of the SAP longitudinal connectivity is increased, reconnecting tributary habitats for coho spawning and rearing. We have developed a monitoring framework that we will continue to refine through the FIP process that will evaluate both the rate at which the SAP is being implemented and the degree to which it is achieving the desired results. The monitoring is designed to capture both project effectiveness as well as overall sub-basin status and trends. We recognize that the SAP, like all other plans, has been generated with imperfect information. We're operating off of the best available science at the time. And we most notably acknowledge that there's still considerable uncertainty about climate change. Therefore, we really rely on an adaptive management approach that has been articulated in our FIP application and well articulated in our SAP process. Additionally, all of the projects identified in the SAP rely on willing landowners, and those willing landowners have been secured for the FIP projects identified. But adaptive management will continue to be essential to the long-term success of this plan and project. And we feel that this is really a strength of our robust partnership with having a wide variety of experts continuing to provide updated science and increase our ability to adaptively manage. So that is our project overview, and we look forward to answering your questions.
Great. Thank you for that. And thank you all for joining us. The first question we had for you, which I don't think will be a surprise, is does the partnership anticipate any challenges associated with decision-making, given the large number of partners and the need for consensus of a quorum?
Yeah, so great question. Overall, as mentioned, this group has been working together largely for 27 years on a consensus-based approach, and we've had a really strong history of success of doing that. Additionally, we talked and thought that through really well when we were creating our governing documents, which are on page 9. This is spoken to on page 9 of our governing documents. The consensus is required for large, high level decisions. So if we want to change the way that we're operating, we want to alter our governing documents, or we want to alter the strategic action plan itself, for example, that would require consensus. But for project level decisions and changes that have to happen very adaptively in order to be efficient, that does not require consensus. However, again, we have a really strong history of that, including in our SAP of working well on consensus. Additionally, we have options for partners to recuse themselves from decisions if appropriate. We also have protocols that allow partners who might be absent at the time of a decision. They're given up to 10 days to express their opinion, to come to that consensus, but we're actually, the partnership is able to move on if there's no response within 10 days. And we also pre-identify any decisions that require consensus on agendas weeks prior to the meeting occurring so that partners can adjust accordingly.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here this afternoon and sharing about your project. Next question is, the proposal references a climate resiliency mapping tool that was developed by partners. Describe the tool and how the partnership will utilize it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Max Beacon. I'm the Conservation Director at the Wild Rivers Land Trust. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you all today. So that tool was developed by us at the Wild Rivers Land Trust, and it's some work we undertook a few years ago to pull together some climate resiliency information to help us make decisions based on expected climate impacts. And so the main data set that we used for that tool was the Nature Conservancy's data. It's called Conserving Nature's Stage, was kind of the report that was published under. So we took that data, that was a regional kind of Pacific Northwest scale data set, and we took that and clipped it to our service area, summarized it by the hexagons that are used in the Oregon Conservation Strategy, which I think are 1 kilometer. And then we summarized the information about where on the landscape we would expect to see terrestrial resilience into the future, places that provide high amounts of different niches, for different animals and plants to persist in the future. So that was the biggest input there. But we also recognize that TNC's data on terrestrial climate resilience doesn't address aquatic resilience. So we pulled in some information from the Norwest project at the U.S. Forest Service's Rocky Mountain Research Station around projected temperature and flow in 2040 and 2080, as well as sea level rise from Dr. Laura Brophy and colleagues. We also used public and protected lands database to look at some additional benefits from having adjacency to public and protected lands, and a few other data sets as well. But so that information allows us to select, where we're doing projects based on where in our landscape we expect to see resiliency into the future for maintaining biodiversity, but also allows us to describe some co-benefits of the restoration and protection projects we're doing. So we can use that data to say, this is in an area that, based on the climate data that we have, we can expect to see these co-benefits from this restoration work that we're doing. And that's just a general overview, but I think I'll stop there.
Great, thanks very much for that response, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for meeting with us and having the opportunity to talk about your project and your application. The next question we have for your team is measuring outcomes to show meaningful progress will likely require monitoring and analysis beyond the timeline of this initiative. Could you please describe the partnership's plan for monitoring beyond the timeline of this FIP?
Thank you, Lindsay, for that question and the opportunity to talk today. My name's Ed Hughes. I'm at the Coos Watershed Association, and I think the straightforward answer to the concern there is that the SAP outlines the strategies and actions that would plan to occur over the next 23 years of the SAP. And this is well beyond the timeline of the FIP, the 6-year FIP. But the partnership is committed to that long-term plan, and many of the recovery metrics described in the monitoring plan used to determine the meaningful progress that's being made and that's required by particularly agency partners and in the team. Also, kind of within our team, the strength of our team lies a lot in the long-term monitoring that's programmatic for many of our partners, whether that's fish population monitoring, water quality monitoring, and tidal wetland monitoring. And so these are foundational pieces within our partners and what they bring to the table. And so we're leveraging those individual capacities to network them to monitor projects at the effectiveness of projects at that scale, and then also the trends and status at the sub-basin scales, 7th field in the lowlands and 6th field in the uplands. I guess I would add that the long-term, the difference in the FIP and the SAP really has a lot to do with the adaptive planning. And so learning from the FIP, the next 6 years from the FIP will really guide and allow us to adapt going forward for the long term.
Great, thank you for that. Next question on the list here is that the proposal cited potentially outdated documents related to climate change. Could you describe how climate change is considered in the work plan?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tim Elder. I'm with the Wild Salmon Center. After we got the comments back from the review team, we went back and reviewed, and we didn't actually find any outdated documents related to climate change. So I'm just going to go ahead and describe how we consider this in our long-term and our short plan work. So the Coos SAP integrates climate change in a number of ways and at multiple scales. Climate change was considered during the sub-watershed stress assessment, during the sub-watershed ranking and the prioritization process, and in the short-term work plan that proposes projects that will be implemented over the next 6 years. So climate change will have a wide variety of impacts. These impacts won't manifest uniformly across the landscape. In the Coos Basin, the most likely effects of climate change will be increased frequency of high flow events in the winter and decreased flows and high water temperatures in the summer. So we considered how to address the predicted climate change scenarios and integrated an up-to-date climate science. And this is reflected in our partnership's long-term strategies and goals. So for those strategies and goals, in order to provide velocity refugia during increasingly frequent high flow events, the partnership expects to increase in-stream complexity and off-channel rearing habitat along 63 miles of tributary and 89 miles of main stem, to increase estuary and rearing capacity for juveniles that are displaced downstream by those high flow events. Tidal reconnection is planned to be restored in 93 acres of disconnected freshwater and salt marsh. In order to protect and enhance cold water sources, the partnership plans on enhancing riparian function along 81 miles of main stem and tributary. And to increase coho access to cold water, the partnership plans to restore longitudinal connectivity to 67 miles of tributary habitats. So the future climate change scenarios and conditions were explicitly considered in the short-term work plan when designing and selecting the restoration projects that were included in the proposal. So for projects that include culverts, we plan to convert culverts to bridges to offset the increased debris delivery due to increasing high flow events. In cases where culverts can't be converted to bridges, we plan to size those culverts, size them to accommodate the increasing flow volumes. For tide gates, invert elevation was factored in to accommodate for sea level rise. Enhancing riparian function within the tributaries and main stems throughout the basin to protect and enhance sources of cold water. The short-term work plan also plans to increase habitat complexity and off-channel rearing throughout the basin to provide velocity refuges during those increasing flow events, and then removing longitudinal barriers that'll help provide access to sources of cold water.
Great, thanks, Tim.
All right, I have your last formal question. It's kind of long, so I can break it up if you need me to. So it goes, while the proposal includes a diverse set of partners, the work plan shows the most of the work will be done by the Coos Watershed Association. And this is where it gets into kind of two parts. Describe why it makes sense for the Coos Watershed Association to be the primary implementer, and describe Coos Watershed Association's capacity to both facilitate the partnership and implement the majority of the work.
Great, thanks for the question, Corey. I'm Haley Lutz with CUSWA. I'd be happy to answer that. So our organization, we are in a rural part of the south coast of Oregon, and our organization has the greatest capacity to do this work and span across both private and public lands. We actually have 12 full-time staff at our organization, including a full monitoring team, restoration team, outreach team. We run our own native plant nursery for the whole South Coast for restoration projects. So we really have the capacity to do this. And we've acted in this role, as I said, for nearly the 27-year history because of our capacity. However, it's highly collaborative. So all of the partners you see here today and the ones that are not on the phone are a part of this, and they're a part of this capacity. We're simply the lead. So our partners, we all set priorities together. So we identify projects and work plans collectively. All of our partners participate in providing feedback on design of projects for restoration projects. They include, feedback for our monitoring team. As Ed mentioned, all of our monitoring is done collaboratively. It ties into state and federal data sets and plans as well. So it's highly collaborative, but we have the capacity to be the lead. We're also how we're structured, and really the impetus for watershed councils was to be that local organization with local trust and relationships to bring together a diverse set of partners, which is what you're seeing here. And it's been a really effective model for us, specifically in this area for the last 27 years. That being said, there are, other organizations who are receiving funding as part of this FIP and taking on lead roles. Coos SWCD, for an example, is taking a very lead role in the water quality monitoring. South Saluda National Estuarine Research Reserve is a lead implementer for restoration. So there are other organizations being the lead as well within the FIP. And additionally, just funding structure is a big piece of this, right? So our organization is 100% grant funded, whereas most of our other partners are not. And so there is funding and capacity for their work, but there's not for our organization. So that's hence why you're seeing a lot of the funding ask be towards CUSWA, the local nonprofit. Also, I wanted to just open up some space to see if Andrew and Katie, if you wanted to add anything else about kind of the effectiveness of this model and capacity from a local implementer and federal agency partner standpoint.
Hello, my name is Andrew Cioni and I'm representing Coos Soil and Water Conservation District. I'd like to second what Haley said about Coos Watershed Association being uniquely qualified to lead these projects in the Coos Basin. They have 27 years of experience and a large capacity locally. Coos Soil and Water Conservation District has a smaller workforce capacity and also a broader focus area, Coos County. And we've been focusing a lot on the Coquille River Basin. However, we do implement restoration projects in the Coos Basin as needed, especially those that align with our focus on agricultural water quality. Because of our focus on ag water quality, we have been doing a lot of water quality monitoring the past few years. And when we developed this plan, we decided that Coos SWCD would lead the water quality monitoring for the Coos Basin Coho Partnership.
Hi, I'm Katie Woodruff. I'm the district conservationist for NLCS in Coquille. And the partnership really does, a lot of government agencies are part of the partnership. And sometimes it's easier to have funds flow through the COOSWA and it's more efficient and effective. And then other times we partner on projects. So if we're working on private land, sometimes agency funding is used for part of the projects. And then other funding is, is from the Coos Basin and the COOSWA. So we kind of really partner together on all projects. And a lot of times we come together, all of us, onto a site to see who can be the best one to implement the projects at the site. So it's very collaborative. And also NLCS base a lot of all CIS on what the COOSWA was doing in the area.
All right, and we do have a few minutes left if the committee has any additional questions. And if not, for the partnership to provide any closing remarks if you'd like.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. Oh, Dan, did you pop on and have a question?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really a question, more of a curiosity back to the first question about the consensus-based decision making. It sounds like you guys got a lot going on there and a lot of great, consensus decision making happening. But I'm a little curious what happens if you don't get there. Is there like a formal dispute resolution process?
Yeah, so in our governing documents, we do have some language about that, and it's mostly, again, we've never had that happen yet. And right. I think if there was really disagreement about that, we've had times when there has been concern, and we've really worked to find that middle ground solution where people are compromising. And I think that, we're, again, that consensus base is on that really high level decision making of, modifying our 25-year strategic plan or our governing documents. And it's in our ethic to not to do that unless we can find a path forward to compromise and find that middle ground.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Go ahead, Haley, if you did have
Great.
a comment.
Awesome. Yeah. So thank you again for the opportunity to talk with you today and get to talk about our application and our partnership more. As evidenced by all the folks on the call today, this is a great group that really has a strong history of doing this work, and you see that in multiple ways in our application. And we're very excited about the completion of our Coho strategic action planning process. We've been very fortunate to to have a lot of science and research in the Coos Basin. And so this plan is very, very rigorous. And part of our multi-year process was, taking all those watershed assessments that OWEB has invested in and other partners have contributed to, and really rolling that up into this and having a very strategic prioritization, and some great willing landowners that we, as I said, we have those agreements with our landowners for all the FIP projects moving forward. So we're really excited to collaborate on this and have OWEB be a part of our 25-year vision for coho recovery in the Coos. Thank you.
All right, and thank you to the partnership for your time developing the application and working together for 27 years, and for your time today and the dialogue with the committee. So tune in tomorrow for the committee's deliberations. And we're going to take a few minutes to transition to the next partnership, which is the Hood River Basin Partnership. And as soon as we have them all online, we'll begin.
Thank you.
All right, we'll get started. Welcome to the Hood River Basin Partners. Thank you for being here for the interview. As we've been doing, we'll have the partnership provide a brief overview of your application, and then the grants committee will proceed to their questions. We've got 30 minutes allotted, so that will carry us till 3:46. And I'll turn it over to the partnership for your intro.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just doing a quick scan to make sure everybody did make it on a little earlier as we were thinking.
I've got everyone checked off that registered, Cindy. And so everyone that pre-registered is present and moved in.
Steve Pappas was registered.
He was here earlier.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and he said he could join early, so I'm not quite sure what happened.
Here, he might have had technical challenges. He and Catherine have been on and off, I think, a couple times.
Okay.
Catherine is on now.
Let me just quickly text him to see if he's going to be coming back on. Usually he does not have any challenges with.
I can do that, Cindy, if you want to just get started.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Les. Okay, well, good afternoon. My name is Cindy Thiemann and with the Hood River Watershed Group. And I'd like to introduce all the partners who are on the call. And if you guys wouldn't mind raising your hand, although I guess everybody's names are visible as well, so that might be unnecessary. So we've got Chuck Galing and Alex Danielson, also with the Hood River Watershed Group. We've got Heather Hendrickson with the Soil and Water Conservation District, Ryan Gerstenberger and Patrick Hayden with Confederated Tribes, the Warm Springs, Jason Seals with ODF&W, Catherine Arndt with the U.S. Forest Service Hood River Ranger District, Les Perkins with Farmers Irrigation District, hopefully Steve Pappas with East Fork Irrigation District, and then we have Craig Dehart on the phone with Middle Fork Irrigation District. And a handful of us are prepared to answer the various questions, and I am going to start off with our overview. So we have a strong portfolio of projects that includes in-stream habitat restoration, converting open irrigation delivery systems to pressurized pipelines, on-farm irrigation efficiency projects, and a handful of specific stakeholder engagement projects as well. And all of these squarely address the primary limiting factors to salmon and steelhead recovery in our basin. As we talked about in our application, partners in the basin have been working together for over 25 years. and have accomplished significant amounts of assessment, monitoring, planning, and conservation projects. And until now, our partnership has not applied for FIP funding because we were able to secure sufficient funding for projects as they developed. However, with the completion of the strategic action plan, we are poised to implement larger scale habitat and water conservation projects. And this will require larger amounts of funding, and in particular, state funding that can leverage federal funding. So for example, East Fork Irrigation District has completed a watershed plan environmental assessment that makes the district eligible for $25 million in federal PL 566 dollars. And to date, they have secured, I think, going on 8 million now. Farmers Irrigation District will have their watershed plan completed this fall, which will help fund their pipeline project as well. So FIP funding for these water conservation pipeline projects in the initiative would leverage about 13.8 million in federal dollars, which would construct 15 miles of pipeline projects and protect 10 CFS of water in stream. And I want to highlight that we are in the strongest position right now to secure federal funding before irrigation and water districts in other states complete their watershed plans and start to compete for those federal funds. We have also lined up 10 miles of fish habitat enhancement projects on private and public lands, all in areas with high intrinsic potential for steelhead salmon habitat. And these projects were prioritized using BPA's Atlas model and tribally funded intrinsic potential models. And the tribe's BPA funding is providing approximately 5.6 million in cost share to support this initiative. And FIP funding would greatly assist the tribes in meeting their salmon recovery and tribal harvest goals. The Hood River is one of 11 cold water refuges on the Columbia River, but it's not well utilized by salmon and steelhead at this point in time. And we think that it's because of poor habitat complexity. And so fortunately, efforts to restore habitat at the mouth of the river are getting underway. Congress authorized the Corps to complete a general investigation at the mouth of the Hood River through a general investigation. And the Port of Hood River and tribes are the local sponsors. And we, for that, we need a strong source of non-federal match to complete the study. And a final highlight is that we have an accurate assessment, probably one of the better climate assessments in the state in terms of climate impacts to our rivers. And we have a detailed plan that the partners have been working on for several years to mitigate for impacts using water conservation projects. And I think that this kind of information and conservation results could serve as a good model for other partnerships in the state. And finally, we are covering a large amount of work with a cost-effective budget, and all partners are ready to go. And ready for your questions.
Great, thanks, Cindy. I'll kick off the first one here. Describe how the partnership TA budget supports the partnership and enables it to be successful throughout the course of the initiative.
So breaking it down a little bit more, we asked OWEB for $28,000 per biennium for partnership technical assistance. And that includes funding for watershed group staff to convene and manage tasks affiliated with FIP funding. So we have 200 hours per year for partnership coordination, assistance with individual OWEB proposals, and match fundraising. We have 40 hours per year for annual field trips and meetings. We have 50 hours per year for OWEB FIP reporting, and 30 hours per year to participate in OWEB FIP meetings and trainings. So we did break it down to come up with that 28,000 per biennium. The annual meeting and field trip, are the places that we will review completed and then upcoming projects. We'll have more partnership meetings if we need to. But these meetings are where we'll evaluate how projects are progressing and make adjustments if necessary. And prepare for next year's projects. Also important to note that other partners are covering their own costs for partnership meetings and activities. And, you know, we have a very sustainable, supportive partnership that's been some of whom have been providing, specifically the tribes and irrigation districts have been providing $60,000 a year in local funding to support partnership activities and project development and monitoring and stakeholder engagement. So we have other funds to provide there. We're not completely relying on that 28,000 to continue to maintain that partnership and achieve sort of the things that need to be achieved from a partnership standpoint.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here this afternoon and sharing information about your project. It's great to learn about everything going on. Your next question is, how does the stakeholder engagement budget support the partnership to engage with private landowners to achieve the irrigation efficiency goal of the initiative?
Happy to start the answer on that question. So we have broken down the stakeholder engagement grant portion of the FIP into a few sections. So we have $50,000 identified for an on-farm irrigation barrier assessment, where we want to interact with landowners and really kind of get at why some of these irrigation improvements are not happening and try to address that. And then also, figure out what needs to be done in that area. So that will increase our connections with the irrigators in the area and will feed into the technical assistance work that we 2 and 3. And so in bienniums 2 and 3, we have about $120,000 per biennium in technical assistance to assist irrigators with those on-farm irrigation upgrades. So that we feel will adequately staff that effort from the SWCD's point of view. There's also quite a bit of work being done at the irrigation districts, and Les, I don't know if you want to respond to that part of it.
Sure. Yeah. So outside, outside of that budget, the districts also have budgets that we utilize for doing outreach in conjunction with the watershed group and the SWCD. So we work with the partners in the watershed group to engage private landowners and farmers. The district supply funding and staff to perform outreach and run programs for irrigation efficiency, such as sprinkler exchanges. We do cash matches and lending expertise to growers as they build their systems out. We also send postcards and post information to our websites regarding conservation opportunities and do outreach regarding additional funding opportunities through NRCS. And we maintain bilingual staff, all the districts do, to do outreach in both English and Spanish. Steve, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything from East Fork's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, you covered a lot of it, Les, and we kind of do the same. We're bilingual and we do workshops and stuff just to help people get through and help them apply for that. And other than that, we're kind of following suit like you are.
And in case it's not clear, basically all of the irrigation for agriculture is through the irrigation districts. So there aren't outside irrigators. We reach them all through the districts, and then so.
Yeah, there's five districts with 24,000 acres that we serve, and basically all of the ag land is within those districts.
Okay, great. Thank you for those responses and that information, and good afternoon. Your third question for your team is, could you please describe how the decision was reached to include the entire Hood River Basin geography within the FIP initiative geography? Thank you.
Yeah, I can get that one. So we actually did consider that when we were working this up, and how narrow or broad in our watershed to do that. And Cindy alluded to that BPA Atlas model. So we did a pretty intensive exercise on project prioritization and everything. And what we found was there was really high intrinsic potential reaches throughout the watershed. We have kind of important species and populations that are throughout the watershed. So we have a lot of listed fish here: summer steelhead, winter steelhead, coho, chinook, two stalks of chinook, bull trout, lamprey, the tribes are really interested in. And so we wanted to kind of benefit all these fish. And something else about the Hood that should probably be pointed out is it's a really disturbance-prone watershed. And so if we focus on one area, we get a lot of glacial debris events that might really damage one fork at some time or another. So these metapopulation dynamics in the Hood River are really important to kind of have good habitat spread at different parts of the basin. So that was something we took, very seriously there. And we've got, important partners throughout the basin as well. So kind of, spreading that love and making sure, we could kind of reach all these constituents and partners was also important for us. So we wanted to include the whole watershed here, and it's really not a giant watershed. It's a nice kind of compact little watershed here. So it's not really a large area, compared to some other places. So it seemed like appropriate to have that be at kind of our entire Hood River Valley scale.
Thanks for that. Oh.
I was wondering, Kat, if you wanted to add anything else on that?
I think Ryan really summarized it really nicely. I think we all struggled with this question. We had a pretty robust conversation about this, and I think he really encapsulated what we all kind of arrived at, which is, we have coho that really use some areas. We have chinook that use multiple areas. And if we really wanted to do good things for multiple species, we needed to be nimble and not just focus on, for example, one subbasin. Having said that, I wanted to let everyone know we have done a tremendous amount of work already in the Hood. The Forest Service has had focused watershed restoration in the upper watersheds on Forest Service land now for several decades. We just completed about 7 years of focused work in the West Fork of the Hood on Forest Service land. We pretty much removed all but 1 or 2 fish passage barriers in the high headlands. And so, there's been a lot going on before this FIP. And I think one of the things that we really realized is that we're kind of back in the place where we really want to focus now on a lot more private land. And as Ryan was saying, some of the more diverse tributaries. And I think that really was where we felt we would get the most bang for the buck. And so I think, there is a focused effort in terms of where we're restoring things, but it does encompass all of the watershed. So, yeah.
Yeah, and there's no way to mute that phone. I would just highlight too that those maps that we have in the application and the action plan showing intrinsic potential do speak for themselves. I feel like, in that there's high intrinsic potential across the watershed. It's not, perhaps some watersheds have subbasins that really stand out, and that's not so much the case with this basin. Also water conservation obviously is a big component of our proposal, and water conservation happens across the whole watershed and feeding into the main stem. And so again, another point for having it be the whole watershed.
Great, thanks for that. Question number 4, could you describe how the initiative's implementation and monitoring data will be managed, analyzed, and interpreted?
I can take that. I'm Alex with the Watershed Group. I think first and foremost, it's important to note that the partnership has included $50,000 in the first biennium to fund the development of a partnership monitoring plan. And this will really take the 25 to 30 years worth of monitoring work that partners in this basin have done and put it together in a cohesive partnership plan. We plan to have the technical advisory committee and other partners work together with a hired consultant to develop this plan, really fine-tuning our design, our methods, our management and interpretation into a plan that's scientifically sound and that really demonstrates whether our chosen conservation actions were designed and implemented properly, whether our objectives were met, and then moving into the adaptation process and whether we need to make changes going forward. And this plan will be based on the progress monitoring framework and our action plan. And it's really focused on a subset of outputs to measure our progress towards our implementation and ecological outcomes. We have identified metrics that we will directly measure. So habitat and spawning surveys, temperature monitoring, flow meters, to determine progress towards our goals. What we do know for the initiative is that the watershed group will be the keeper of our implementation and effectiveness data. We'll
Looks like Alex's feed froze.
Hopefully not her, but just her screen.
If possible, perhaps try turning off video to see if that helps.
I think if Heather, if you and I turn our cameras off, maybe the whole load, we're all in one office. So it might be overloading.
And we are downloading our drive from backup right now currently too. So I can keep going for Alex until she can drop back on. So the watershed group will keep all that, will be the keeper of all that information, and will be compiling the data annually and collecting, pre-project and post-project data from partners and storing that in a database that has not yet. We'll gather some research and, ask others what kind of other partnerships, what they're using to store their data, and just use that kind of to guide what we do. And so then the watershed group will interpret whether the metrics are showing progress into meeting those ecological outcomes. And then we have a technical advisory committee that will meet, and then we'll review and review that data that's managed and compiled by the watershed group. So the partners in the basin have been collecting data for the past 30 years or so. The SWCD, the irrigation districts, NRCS, we have a lot of information on amounts and locations of on-farm irrigation upgrades and water conservation data. The tribes in ODFW have comprehensive fishery resource monitoring data, where they look at baseline fish population data like adult escapement, juvenile smolt production, spawning surveys, and other community composition distribution aspects. We have the tribes watershed group and the irrigation districts and the SWCDs have been involved in water quality data collection, mainly temperature and stream flow. And then the tribes watershed group and Forest Service have a lot of stream habitat morphology data that they've been collecting over the decades. And in the past year, the tribes watershed group and Forest Service have been working closely together to develop a basin-wide stream habitat restoration monitoring protocol to document the stream habitat prior to and after restoration activities, using like habitat typing, pebble counts, photo monitoring. So everyone's getting on the same page with the type of monitoring there. And the results will be really easy to share and compare across different projects. And then all of the partners already are doing reporting to local, state, and federal agencies, which will, gather and compile and use that information as well. Sorry, Alex, you're back.
Apparently 3 of us on the same internet is too much right now. So apologies for that.
No worries, it happens. Nice pivot. You guys got each other covered. That's good.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so last formal question for the project. Can you explain the initiative's role with pesticide stewardship?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So the Hood Rivers had a really successful pesticide stewardship partnership program since 2000. It was one of the first in the state. And there's been efforts in those past 20 years to not only monitor pesticides, but create and use and implement BMPs with the local farmers to reduce pesticide use. And over those 20 years, we've seen a big reduction in the pesticides detected. So it's been really, really successful. People here are very used to hearing about the results and learning about them. So there's that aspect of pesticide stewardship. The SWCD, we currently have an OWEB grant, stakeholder engagement grant called Hood River Pesticide Management. And we started that last year. And we are providing workshops in Spanish and in English. The first one that we did was around calibration of air blast sprayers. And then we'll have some other ones later this year and on for the next couple of years around best management practices with pesticides. There's a lot of streams bisecting orchards here. And so not only do we want to get people to, be better with their sprays around those open waterways, but we also, through this effort, are identifying landowners that have waterways that need to be planted for buffers. And so part of that project is identifying those landowners and then working to getting funding to implement those planting projects on those. And we did just get a small grant from the Tri-County Waste Management Group to do our first planting associated with this project on 2 properties early spring next year. So the third aspect is that we're working with the tribes. We have some technical assistance funding from the tribes to identify properties that need riparian fencing and planting. So this is additional technical assistance money to go along with the OWEB funds to support landowners in planting and identifying and planting those spray buffer properties. So through ODA, we anticipate the pesticide stewardship partnership to continue, and actually with some of the new staff there, we're in some conversations about getting some additional funds to do a little bit more sampling and some different sampling, and then write a strategic plan specific around pesticides so that we can be geared up for the future and be adaptive with new pests and new spray regimes and things like that come up. So we didn't specifically ask for money around pesticide stewardship because we have some of these other funding opportunities coming in. Oh, and then one other thing is that we're part of the EPA's Columbia River Restoration Program, and they also have a grant program for pesticide reduction type efforts. So we felt like that was another opportunity to bring in some outside funding to complement these efforts. So.
All right, we've got a few minutes remaining if the committee has any further questions. And if not, then if the partners would like to make any closing comments, we do have a couple of minutes remaining.
I'll just throw out one quick one. It seemed like there's sort of a mix of kind of, ready to go projects and mixed with some project development. Could you talk a little bit about the balance between like sort of shovel ready projects and those projects that you kind of hope to develop in working with partners? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I can start off on that. So there are water conservation pipeline projects that are basically shovel ready, that are listed. All of the projects in Biennium 1 are shovel ready. In terms of if FIP funding were awarded, we would be ready to implement next summer. We have, and so for example, we've got 2 fish passage projects one fish passage project that could happen next summer with FIP funding. Another passage project probably will happen with Forest Service funding at some point next year. And as far as in-stream habitat projects, Neal Creek and the East Fork Hood River, there's active conversations going on. Landowners are engaged. So those are, essentially ready to go. So not completely designed, but on their way. And then there are the projects that are farther out are along, other landowners along the East Fork Hood River, let's say in Biennium 3. And then there are some ones on the main stem Hood River, for example, on the Powerdale lands that things are evolving there in a really great way because the local railroad was recently purchased from a sort of a national company that didn't really have a local interest. So the railroad is purchased by a local company who is really interested in being a sort of a collaborator. So that's great news for the land along the main stem of the Hood River in terms of the potential for doing restoration. So those are bigger projects, but they're looking really, things are looking really positive there.
Great, thank you for that.
All right, that does bring us to time, and I want to express our thanks to the partnership for your time developing the application, working together, and for the dialogue today. So thank you. And as the partnership exits, we will go over next steps with the grants committee.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much for having us today.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, well, good luck indeed, because that was the fun part. And now comes the hard part. The committee is charged now with putting these applications in rank order. And I just wanted to give some background for that in a couple of areas. One, of course, is what does our available funding picture look like versus what we've received in these applications. And if you total up the Biennium 1 ask of these 11 applications, we're at about $30 million. Our spending plan that the board has adopted currently has $10 million in it. At the July board meeting, we do have, in addition to making these FIP awards, we also have an agenda item to rebalance the spending plan, which we do at the midpoint of every biennium for a couple of reasons. There are three sources of funding that are going into this. I use the word rebalance, but it's really an addition of funds to the spending plan. We have three sources for those additional funds. One is with our Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Fund grants. We apply for those grants annually, but the spending plan is a 2-year spending plan. So we don't account for money we haven't been awarded yet when we first create the spending plan. And so now we have notification of an award for that second year, so we have those funds to add to the plan. We also have recapture funds, which consist of funds from projects that were either canceled or finished under budget. And there's a fairly significant amount of funds in that category. And then we also have this time around, which is a little bit unusual, some funds that we had left in reserve when we created the spending plan in the first place. And that was due to the uncertainty we were facing at the time, based on budget reductions we had gone through and uncertainties over where things were going with COVID and so forth. So with those three sources, the board will have about $13 million to allocate to different spending plan line items, which mean, and staff will come up with recommendations for where those funds can be placed. But what that means is there's a good chance that there could be additional available funds beyond the 10 million to put into these FIP applications. So hopefully that helps as you're thinking through this and you're looking at matching up the ones you have in the top of your ranking with the funds they're requesting to give you an idea of where a funding line could possibly be drawn. And so what we'd like to do now is have you spend about 15 minutes, if that's possible, to go through your your SurveyMonkey request, or your SurveyMonkey survey that was emailed to you, and get those back to you this afternoon so that staff can work on making calculations to come up with our average ranking so that we can present those to you tomorrow. With regard to the SurveyMonkey vehicle, we can stay on the line in case you have questions on how that works, but it's pretty simple. You're either physically dragging projects in order, or you can use the arrow keys there to simply choose a number from 1 to 11 for your rankings. You'll notice there's a COI box there, which stands for conflict of interest. And for board members, that simply means if you or a family member have a financial interest in one of these applications, that would be a conflict of interest. I'm not aware that any of you do, but just wanted to mention that just in case. So if there's no financial conflict of interest, you can ignore that and simply put them in rank order. So are there questions before we proceed to that? Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, I have a question. So Dan, Lindsay, and I are all first time at this, and we don't have Barbara here today. So I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more on how we're ranking them on the technical merit, and then that ranking order is what is then going to be recommended to the board for funding. Of course, Dan and I are both non-voting members and not making financial decisions for OWEB. So even though we're voting, it's a recommendation for funding, what we're really doing is looking at the scope of the recommendations put together by the committees that reviewed these ahead of time, the interviews today, the questions, and then we're making a technical assessment to get in orders. Can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Corey. I think that's a good way to characterize it. You're making a technical assessment based on what you saw in the evaluations, what you heard today in the interviews. Each of you is individually creating that ranking based on your technical assessment, and then we'll present an aggregated or composite ranking to the full board, which will then vote on the funding decisions. And so you're not making a funding recommendation, you are just simply putting these applications in rank order. And then that rank order will be the starting point for the board deliberations in July.
Excellent. And I do, just since this public meeting, want to go on the record that I recognize that the NRCS is a partner on, I think, all but one of these applications, and we're involved in the interviews and the creation of the FIPs at different levels depending on them. But I personally was not involved in any of the deliberations or projects or proposals for any of the FIPs, and will certainly take my subject matter expertise of myself and my opinions when I go forward to do this, and not necessarily consider the NRCS perspective. I'll look at the project as a whole. So I just want to make sure I got that on the record.
Thanks for that, Corey. Much appreciated. And go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, kind of questions in the same vein as Corey. So are obviously OWEB staff have a tremendous amount of technical expertise as well, and a lot more experience in sort of evaluating restoration projects. Are the proposals, I have, the kind of high, medium, low rankings from staff to help sort of guide me, combined with what I'm taking away from the interviews. But are the proposals currently ranked by the staff reviews as they are, or are they just sort of randomly organized? Does that make sense?
It does, yes. They are not ranked by staff at all, nor were they ranked by the expert panels. What we asked the expert panels to do was to take each criterion that's in the evaluation criteria and administrative rules and assign a rating to each one of those. Mm-hmm. And that's what you see reflected in the summary sheet. Those ratings in the summary sheet are a composite of all of the ratings of the evaluation criteria that came from the expert panel. Staff did not alter those recommendations or those ratings, I should say, in any way. And we have set this up from the inception of the FIP program to have more of a board role in recommending funding, which is a little bit different than almost all of the other offerings that we have at OWEB. And the rationale for that is, obviously it's a big chunk of the spending plan that's going to be awarded all at once. And so, when the program was conceived, it was felt that the board should play a stronger role than is typical in funding. And so we don't, normally we have a staff recommendation, like for open solicitation awards. For FIP, we do not have a staff recommendation, although staff have obviously been involved heavily in compiling all of the information and facilitating those expert review panels to create the packets that you have in front of you. But the process is designed for the committee to take on that recommendation role. And again, the recommendation isn't necessarily a funding recommendation, but it's a recommendation of a rank order of these applications.
Okay. Well, hopefully you end up with something that coalesces around a rank order from the three of us.
Well, I think we will. And keep in mind too, that when we aggregate your rankings and present that to you in the morning, that's a starting point. You're not wed to it. You can have some discussion about how that shook out. For example, if your rankings look a little bit different than the aggregate, you might want to explore, what went into other people's ranking differently than yours, and then reach your consensus by the end of the time tomorrow on what that final ranking should look like.
Okay. I may
Lindsay,
need
did
more
you
than
have
15 minutes.
Yeah, I might too. Lindsay, did you have any questions since you're not on the screen?
Yeah, sorry, my video is working. I don't know if you guys saw that earlier, but there it goes again. Is my video looking funny?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, totally. Sorry about that. Yeah, I do have a question, and it's more of a technical budgetary related question. So Eric, you had mentioned that the current OWEB budget is 10 million, and then there's some kind of 3 different funding opportunities that are going to come along and potentially increase that line item. And you mentioned, you threw out the number 13 million. Does the 10 potentially go up to 13, or is 13 additional million available to be spread across other lines?
Right, it's the latter. The 13 million is the total available that the board will allocate where it sees fit to the different line items, and staff are going to provide recommendations at the July board meeting. And that staff recommendation will likely include some amount for the FIP line item for these new FIP applications.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I appreciate that. But yeah, no, otherwise I have no other questions. I mean, yeah, it's a lot to digest. I mean, this whole process has just been a lot to digest. So like kind of Dan and Corey, I will do my best.
And just as far as that, the 10 million and the 13 million and or some combination of the two, how many of these do we expect to be funded at the end of the day?
Well, of course, it depends a lot on which ones, because there's a bit of variation in that first biennium request. We have requests for the first biennium that run from a low of 1.3 million to a high of 4 million, and everything in between. So that's really going to drive how many get selected. It just depends on which ones end up, on the upper end of the priority list.
Okay. And the money is for that first biennium, even though these are multiple year projects.
Correct. And that's because the board can only allocate funds in the current biennium for which it has budget authority. But what we do in this process is basically express a desire for a longer term commitment for the second and third bienniums. And then with each biennium, we ask the board to include in the spending plan the second or third, as the case may be, biennium of funding for each FIP partnership based on progress as reported to the board periodically.
Okay.
So we can hang with you while you're doing this exercise in case there's any troubleshooting questions or problems And if you'd like, you can feel free to turn your camera off so you don't feel scrutinized while you're pondering. And we will just be on a holding pattern in case there are questions from anyone.
Go for it. Thanks, everyone.
Just want to say a quick note. Thank you so much to OWEB staff for facilitating and putting all of this stuff together and assisting. It's really made our lives a little bit easier through this whole process. So a huge thank you so much for everything that you guys did.
It's a real pleasure, and you have the hard job, as noted.
Okay, I put it in. Is there anything else? Are we good?
Yes, if you've submitted, then I think you are done for the day.
All right, thank you. And you guys did great. Really, really appreciate the level of organization that always comes from a web. It's great.
And Eric's gonna email it out before we get started tomorrow morning, so you guys have a chance to look at it.
Okay, and are the link in the Zoom
It'll come
meetings?
tomorrow morning, so it'll be at the top of your inbox.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Have a great afternoon.
Bye, Corey. Thank you.
Bye.
I also submitted, but was just hanging around to see if you guys were going to close the poll or what's happening. So I think I will take off as well.
Awesome. Thank
Bye,
you,
Lindsay.
Lindsay.
Okay. Yep. See you tomorrow morning. Thanks. Bye.
I am not having any difficulty technically, so you guys don't need to hang around for me. It's just taking me a